Okay, so as I mentioned, welcome to our presentation for business relationship management, trying to avoid some mistakes and missteps, and the way to do that, because there's many missteps and mistakes to avoid. So best to focus on what should we be doing to make it a bit more crisp and clear. And so that's what our the gist of our presentation will be covering. And so if we go down to our next slide. There we go. So our agenda for this lunchtime period, the steps to follow to avoid mistakes and missteps. I'm going to present the idea of a BRM practice office. We need some type of centralization or coordination of our efforts. Otherwise, it becomes a sea of individual efforts, which is common out there, I find, but not very successful. And from that will lead naturally to needing a BRM framework. So we'll look at a common one from BRM Institute. And then we need some engagement structures, and around the engagement structures, we can come up with processes and practices. And then, as I mentioned, after about the 12:30 mark, we'll take any questions in Q&A. Okay, so let's start off with going into the practice office. So this slide is just the single slide we need to talk about just the overall concept of providing guidance and direction to your BRM practice. So as I've mentioned in my travels, what I've seen as a misstep and mistake is that all too often the BRM role is assigned to a business partner, and the engagement is created with the business partner, and then the BRM is left to figure out, well, now that I'm engaged with the business partner, what am I going to do to provide good value? And of course, whenever you leave things up to chance, never a best practice way of dealing with things. But I found in many cases, in fact, I think the majority of cases, there's an intuitive knowledge that and acceptance that we need BRMs to get a better connection and cooperation and collaboration with our business partners. And to just get better value out of the organization. But beyond that acknowledgement, no one's quite sure how. So it's a common best practice approach. So to define our services and processes, again, we need this necessary guidance and high-level framework, which we'll be getting into. So this is something totally created by me, but I recommend just like you would have a project management office to centralize and come up with project management best practices, we do the same thing with business relationship management. And I don't know if there's another acronym with BPO, but we create a BPO, a business relationship management practice office. And this will allow us to collect all the best practice from across multiple frameworks and choose the best approach that we're going to take or you're going to take in your organization to become more consistent. So once we have this BPO, our best practice office, then we can determine the three critical elements which this presentation focuses on to define a BRM practice in which once we set an engagement between our BRM and our business partners, then they've got a structure in which they can say, here's the different services and processes I offer, and which ones are we going to use for this particular engagement. And so, as I mentioned, we have the high-level framework. We need to sort of gather and choose from where we're going to gather our BRM practice information. And then we can determine a structure which will connect the business and IT organization. And so this is based on a couple of concepts which I'll be presenting. And around the structure, we can then say what are the processes that can work at different parts of the structures. And this would essentially lead into what a lot of people are looking for. This would give me a service catalog where I could say, here's all the services I offer. Here's the level with different structures where these services can perform. And by doing that, you can then get a better, more structured way of saying, here's how we can define the relationship between our business partner and our IT provider. And the last comment here is to think about business relationship management as a professional service that we're offering between the business and IT provider. Very common structure. It's the type of thing we do with a project management office. It's offering project management services to the organization. And project management office has professionals that deliver that service, which are called project managers. So I'm borrowing the same concepts with business relationship management. And we have a professional service office that has a standard list of what we do, and we deliver it through professionals who are business relationship managers. So we take the ad hoc away, and we provide structure. So let's take a look at the first piece. Let's look at a framework we could use around which we can base our BRM practice. And so this is our next section. We go into the framework, and then we go into some structures and process elements. Okay, and so for this one, Pink Elephant's involved with Business Relationship Management Institute, and we do their courses, and we're familiar with their BRM body of knowledge. And they have a great framework and a set of components that allow me to establish a strategic connection with my business partner. And you could actually use it from both strategic and tactical perspective, but we'll get to that. And for now, let's go over what this framework talks about. They refer to this as the House of BRM, and I use this as a framework diagram to understand some of the key components that go into positioning my business relationship management practice office. So I'm going to start with the top, always a good place to start with a framework diagram. And the very top of the house is basically all about positioning a business relationship management practice office within the provider's strategy and operating model. And also we could think about within the organization's strategy and operating model. So a BRM is a connection between business and IT. And we need to look at the strategy of the organization, who's sponsoring a business relationship management practice office, what are they looking to get out of the practice office for the entire organization, and how are they going to define value. And that'll help me clarify the role of our business relationship managers and business relationship management in general. So it's basically a strategic assessment. A strategic assessment and the positioning won't happen without a practice office and some type of practice office manager integrating with the rest of the organization. And of course, strategies are never done once, so we continually improve and realign our strategies as the organization keeps evolving over time. So that's the first part that we need to adopt from our framework is a positioning statement, which is our strategy, to clarify the role and figure out how does the company operate and how will BRM fit in that corporate operations. So then from the strategy level, we go down to what I would call a bit of a tactical level, and we talk about the BRM core disciplines. And so this is where you come up with a balanced approach for business relationship management, which is balanced on the business side, which I might suggest is the left side of this house of BRM, as well as the operational side, which I might suggest is the right side of the house of BRM. And all too often, when it comes down to looking at how people are engaging and currently doing business relationship management without having this kind of structure, they tend to be focused on the servicing aspect to business relationship management. And they're just focused on what services do I have, how are they performing, and it's all sort of technology discussion. Not so much a value harvesting concept, and certainly not a business level of demand shaping, which is getting right up into the business process and strategy creation, and certainly no exploring through workshops and innovation labs. So to be balanced, we need to be business focused and service and operational focused. And then this concept of value harvesting is one way you could think of it as continual improvement, but it's about portfolio management and recognizing it's an ongoing evaluation of value. So many of our structures are going to be based on the basic pillars in the House of BRM. And then the BRM competencies can be thought of as skill sets and different areas that our BRMs need to be skilled in. So it's a great little framework, and the BRMI and the body of knowledge behind all these pieces is a good structure to get some best practice. So now that we've got our framework and we understand we've got a strategy, we've got some basic tactical disciplines which are needed to balance up the business and operational perspectives, and we've got some skill sets, now we need to figure out the structures in which I can apply some practical execution around this framework. And this takes us down to BRM engagement structures. And I've put two basic structures into this section, and have three diagrams, though, to explain. Two of them explain the last one. So to support that framework and to provide a bit of a concrete structure, the first one, which I like a lot and gives them a recommendation that this helps to avoid mistakes, start thinking about a value chain perspective. So again, this is from the BRMI, body of knowledge. And we need to think about end-to-end value, which involves demand shaping and demand management. And the things in the red section of the value chain is typically business-oriented. And then once you cross the line and we have technical services supporting business processes, we then get into the provider context. So the value chain is actually good. It shows balance between business demand management and IT supply management, and gives us a link chain to transform ideas into value. So in looking at just these basic elements here, in terms of a value chain, where do ideas and innovations come from in order to innovate the business and business processes? And how can a BRM get involved in trying to facilitate and help get involved in idea creation? So often we create innovation labs as part of an IT service to work with the business, and a BRM could be providing services around innovation labs to coordinate and be a go-between between business strategy, business process, and what the innovation labs are trying to innovate, giving them direction. So from basic ideas or from just strategy generation in general for the business, then we come up with a bunch of initiatives that we need to validate. So possibilities is a range of possibilities that might help to provide value and innovation to the business partner and specifically into their business processes. So from this list of possibilities that come from multiple ways of getting ideas of change and innovation, then we define them as opportunities. And to define something as an opportunity is basically refining the possibilities to choose one of them. And when we choose one of them, I'll write this into the slide. So we then define a business case. So my opportunities have to be presented with the best practice business case, which allows me to make a logical selection to either carry out this particular opportunity, or maybe it's not high enough value across all projects and initiatives to be carried out. But if it is, then we can execute, which is basically project management. And again, a BRM can be involved in all of these structured pieces of a value chain. And then it becomes operational. And in all of these things, a BRM can offer professional services to be able to manage these parts. And day-to-day operations and maintenance will have day-to-day issues of incidents or changes, other things which a BRM can be involved with. And ultimately, though, the best value will come from value optimization, which is the review of what we have and knowing how it's supporting my business processes and strategy. And over time, value optimization, the diagram doesn't quite show it, but value optimization is basically going back up and validating, are we still meeting the objectives of business value that were defined at the very beginning? This might go on for years, and then eventually we may retire something. So we're going to have a structure later on to help manage this, this structure of a value chain. So supporting this, we have one other structure. So this is good. It's a good idea about how we can create value through this value chain perspective. And we need to adopt this within our business relationship management practice office. So then we need another structure, which is all of those things about the value chain. We also need to have a chain of how was value created in the organization. And for this particular piece, I have two slides, one from Business Relationship Management Institute, and the next one from ITIL, talking about service composition. They're basically saying the same thing, and I want to show that more than one framework can give us some best practice advice. So I'll start off with the BRMI linking business drivers with technology structure. I'll start from the right-hand side. So the right-hand side, whenever you start a discussion here, is a solution-based type of discussion, but it will lead up to the left, which is value-based. So the technology piece is what are my hardware and software components that are put together to form the enablers, which is a service in ITIL language. And services are a collection of technology components, and together that collection of technology components and services, as well as the service management processes, support business initiatives. So the business initiatives are how the business is going to carry out its strategies and success. So services will link into business process. Business process is the usual way that businesses achieve their success, and we help to automate them through services. And then these business processes, once I know the connection between a business process and service, that's great, but then what am I going to do with it? I'm going to move it up to say what are the business processes trying to achieve with overall business strategies and business outcomes that are trying to be achieved. So we want to take the normal sort of technology and service discussions, which are most common for organizations, and go into new territory to talk about business process performance and business process achievement of business outcomes and strategies. And any new type of initiative should be a value-based discussion. So this particular structure here allows the BRM to have not just technology discussions, but we can offer discussions and services and advice from the business level down to the technology level. And typically a BRM doesn't operate down here. They typically operate in these first three columns. And this can be shown another way with the ITIL model. And ITIL is saying the same thing, just in a different way. So we've got all of our technology components, which are managed by our ITIL service management processes. These things are put together in a service. The service is meeting the requirements of utility and warranty through a service level agreement. And services support one or more business processes. And so we could add a layer on top of this diagram. Now, ITIL does talk about business outcomes and strategies, but they don't typically put it in their models. So business outcomes and strategy could be another level on top of this diagram. So I would suggest in our BRM practice office, we adopt the ITIL concepts and structure of a service, and we expand the business process level to also talk about business outcomes and strategies, which the BRMI model is referring to. So now that we've got our two basic structures, we've got a BRMI structure for the value chain, and we have a BRMI structure and an ITIL structure for how services support business processes and business outcomes. So now what do we do around these structures? This is the next and final part of the presentation. So we come up with our engagement processes and practices. And so the first one from BRMI talks about the value management process. So we've got a value chain, and now we have a value management process. So we can define a process for how value creation ideas are being created and captured. And so again, through either innovation labs or being involved in business strategy development, we can define different processes, and we can define our engagement model for what we're going to do around idea creation. And of course, if you're involved at this level with the business, you're a very strategic type of BRM. Out of these innovation labs or strategy sessions, we get a lot of ideas that need to be refined. And when you have a list of ideas, you say, these are all good ideas, and which ones are the better ones? Well, you need to then say, how am I going to measure the value for it? So helping to create a value plan for these different ideas. If I'm involved in stage one, as a BRM, I can be involved in stage two to say, let's come up with a set of measures which will measure business value. And then you can take all of these different ideas and propose one specific idea, the opportunity, and put it into a business case. So a business case is a standard best practice document. Business relationship managers can offer a skill and service in creating business cases for my business partners. And in doing this, they'll take all of their refined ideas for trying to create value, and they'll create a business case for specific alternatives to say this is the best of this collection of ideas. So a business case always has a range of options, and then you make an argument for one specific argument. So then we get that business case approved. BRMs can offer professional service to help get the business case approved by using the organization's governance structures for getting these things approved and budgeted. And then during the project execution, we can monitor the value and communicate the value. And this stage is also repeated operationally, where we can then monitor value in operations and communicate the value. Okay, so we can, again, we don't go into the detail in this presentation, but we can use this to structure our value process engagement. And then the last of the structures, you've got the ITIL framework. And you can see here in the ITIL framework, it It also includes business relationship management right up here. And I'll just do a bit of a verbal walkthrough of how the framework can also give a bit more information of what might be an IT-focused or tactical type of BRM role. So as a quick walkthrough in this section, sorry, I highlighted the wrong piece here. BRM is down here. So BRMs can work with ITIL's portfolio management, which is a life cycle process. Portfolio management is the strategic management of the service catalog. Every time a business partner needs something new, they'll contact their BRM. They'll go into the portfolio process. The BRM will go to them and say, here's a request that a business partner needs. Do we have anything that can currently meet this need? So portfolio management knows everything about the catalog to help me find out if I already have one or more services and technical solutions that can help a business partner. Saves me having to create a business case and create or buy something new. And then also, during the operational stage of portfolio management has a schedule of when every service needs to be reviewed. Well, when a service needs to be reviewed to make sure it's still aligned to business strategies and objectives, the BRM would be the one who typically facilitates that review with their business partner. So if I understand the ITIL portfolio process, I could then say, here's where BRM can offer more services to my business partner. And there may be charging to my business partners, and BRMs can be involved in helping to explain the value related to the billing and chargeback from finance. And when it comes to business process, in ITIL, essentially, demand management is where we can document the business process. ITIL calls that a pattern of business activity. So this could be another area where BRMs can offer a service to the business. Working with demand management, we can help to capture and manage the process documentation and understanding of the business, and demand management will link it to IT services in the portfolio. So BRM is a critical interface across all of those key processes. And then not to be too lengthy in this, but then we can also go across other key processes of the life cycle. Service level management, it's a critical process which looks at creating service level agreement monitoring charts. And through those monitoring charts, we can then look at the performance of different services. So this would help in going back to look at trying to understand performance of the technology and talking to it. That would be the service level management piece. And then we can follow that to have a further conversation about demand management and the effects of the service performance within business process, which would be linked into business strategy and outcomes. So essentially, if I put a highlight on these two things, demand management and service level management could, as a suggestion, let me go back to the linking business drivers diagram. So we could apply our concepts here. So the enablers, we have service level agreement reporting, which tells me how my services are performing, which is a high-level summary of how my technology pieces are performing. And then when we get over to the business how piece, we could be focused on business process reporting. And then we could also link it up here and have strategy outcomes reporting. So we could use the links of service to business process to business strategy and outcomes to have value harvesting. The true value harvesting is that when you make these solution-based discussions strategic by connecting these elements, then we can determine any misalignment or changes that are needed. And so BRMs can be involved in either creating and or analyzing these types of reports and working with the business to confirm business strategy achievement and outcomes. So I won't go through the entire ITIL framework, but we can be involved in other aspects as well. We can be involved in change management. We could represent the business on cabs. We can be involved in release and deployment, representing the business during project releases and updates. We can be involved in service operation with major incidents or requests that have to be expedited, even problems that need to be investigated to create better warranty and quality of service. And of course, everything is involved in continual improvement. Continual improvements linked to the concept as well of value harvesting. So I would suggest we could take all of these process elements as well as the structural frameworks we talked about and the high-level BRMI framework, and this now allows me to come up with a service catalog where I can say, here's all the different things I can do around services, and going back to our other diagram around business process and business outcomes. And we can bring all of this stuff back together by going back to the beginning where we started and talk about our business relationship management practice office, which has this large framework, which is the basic structure for how pieces were put together. And that takes us back to the beginning. Okay, so that's our presentation, just to whet your appetite and give you some high-level strategic thoughts about setting up a business relationship management practice office. And so it's just gone to the end of the presentation, the half-hour mark. And so let's go in and see if we have any questions. Okay, and I know we have our Susan online as well, so I'll have Susan help to let me know if there's any questions that might have come in. Okay, no specific questions that have come up, and so if that's the case, then we'll end our lunchtime presentation here. There is a recording, so you'll find it on our website if you want to come back and review some of the information and concepts that are given. Okay, and so if no other questions, I'll just stay online in case there is something. But I wish you a happy end of week and holiday season. Hope to see you again on more of these sessions or training or conferences that we do.